Hello, everyone. Professor Philip Travis here. I'm going to make this announcement somewhat short, though the factoid for this week that you will post in the extra credit discussion area is going to be directly related to the test. So I think today's announcement should be some pretty good review for a bit of the test. So we have our second test this week. This is the only thing you need to worry about this week is this exam. The exams, of course, are worth a lot in this class, and so make sure you prepare for this exam. There's a study guide. The study guide is posted in our weekly modules content area, and if you follow the study guide and you fill in identifications for all of the terms and items on the study guide, and you understand the topics for the short essay questions. There's 2 short essay questions on this test, and they're in bold print on the study guide. If you work with the study guide all week, you're going to do really well in the test. I try to draw the majority of the questions and topics on the test from things we've been covering in class. So we've had some video lecture quizzes. There are test questions that come from those video lectures. I really try to emphasize the things that we've been emphasizing in class, in our weekly video lectures, and in other quiz assignments. And it's all built off the study guide. So no discussion forum this week, no other assignments, just the test. Focus on the test. Study for the test during the week. Of course, post your extra credit factoid to get your bonus point added to a test this week as well. There will be that, of course. But overall, I just want you to focus on the test. Now, about this test number 2, the 2 portraits you see here, of course, up here is the portrait of John Jay, and of course here is a portrait of Thomas Jefferson, 2 of the very, very significant founding figures in American history. The reason I have them here, and this is an important little bit of review for the test. One of your test essay questions is to explain the development of the 2-party system in the United States. Remember, when the United States was first founded, first with the Articles of Confederation, and then, of course, following the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, the founders, most of them didn't really envision a 2-party system. They didn't envision the idea that there would be issues that were of such significance that individuals would separate out and form their own political parties that would then sort of consolidate their relationship to certain issues and put candidates in positions to gain office in sort of defense or advocacy of those issues. The 2-party system, which of course Americans know all too well today, was not really something the founders envisioned. But following the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, the 2-party system developed almost immediately. And part of that was related to the ratification of the Constitution. The Constitution itself was rather controversial. Remember Patrick Henry, who authored the Anti-Federalist Papers? Patrick Henry refused to go to the Constitutional Convention. He boycotted the Constitutional Convention. So the Constitution in and of itself was rather controversial. Following the ratification, of the Constitution, during the presidency of George Washington, George Washington was, of course, the only unanimously selected president in American history. George Washington was a Federalist, and so he was a champion of a stronger federal government. He was a champion of the right of the federal government to tax certain things, to establish a United States bank, to establish trade relations with Great Britain. He was a Federalist, which very much sort of countered his Secretary of State, who of course was Thomas Jefferson, who would be the 3rd president of the United States. And Jefferson, of course, was an advocate of a smaller sort of governing system, a federal government with less power. He interpreted the Constitution sort of more literally. He was what you might call a strict constructionist, strictly interpreting what the meaning of the Constitution meant. Whereas individuals like Alexander Hamilton, the Treasury Secretary in George Washington's cabinet, as well as Washington himself, they were loose constructionists of the Constitution. And that means that They believe that the Constitution implied authorization of the federal government to do much more than it explicitly said. Anyway, here's the factoid, and it relates to one of the essay questions on the test, which is about the origins of the two-party system. One of the factors that led to the development of the two-party system was something called the Jay Treaty, and it gets its name for this individual here, John Jay, who became associated with sort of creating this treaty. And it was vehemently opposed by Thomas Jefferson. The Jay Treaty was passed during the first term of George Washington, and it was a treaty with Great Britain. And to make a long story short, Great Britain, there was still sort of like with the United States after the end of the Revolution, right? The Revolution was barely a decade old at the time. The Treaty of Paris was 1783. And there were a lot of sort of issues that remained. The British were still occupying a number of forts on the U.S.-Canadian frontier near the Great Lakes region. And there were very tense relations on the high seas as the French Revolution is going on, and the British are sort of becoming increasingly immersed in these geopolitical issues. So the United States, under the presidency of George Washington and the leadership of John Jay, created the Jay Treaty with Great Britain. And what this treaty did was to basically, it got the British to agree to leave some of those forts that I mentioned. It gave the United States and the British both most favored status for trading. And it came to an agreement on matters of war debt from the American Revolution. Now, this was an intensely controversial treaty, particularly for individuals like Jefferson, who believed in sort of the ideals, as he saw it, of the American Revolution. And he thought the United States should be aligning more directly with France, a revolutionary state at the time, a state that was very much influenced by the American Revolution, a state that had helped the Americans win their revolution, and then went on under the leadership of individuals like Thomas Paine and Lafayette, who of course had come over from France, had then begun their own revolution in creation of a republic. And so the Jay Treaty, this treaty with Great Britain, was so controversial that it was one factor in the creation, along with issues like the U.S. Bank, the whiskey tax, and the Whiskey Rebellion. It was one issue that led, during the presidency of George Washington, to the creation of the two-party system in the United States. Summarize that factoid in the extra credit discussion board, and let's have a great week. Study for that test, and let me know if you have any questions.